Hello there and welcome to this week's Granny's Garden. Now this week it's all about why, when and how to lift your irises. Now there are two main groups of irises. One, ones that come from a rhizome, and the second one, ones that stem from a bulb. Most gardens have both types of iris. In the rhizomes you have, say, the bearded iris, the Siberian and the Japanese iris. And in the bulb form you would have the Dutch iris and the small little ones, the reticulata. We're going to look at the question of why. Why would you want to replant your iris? Well, usually there's three main reasons. Number one would be they just aren't where you want them to be. Number two would be because it's not flowering as well as it used to. It used to flower fantastically, and as the clump got bigger and bigger, the central part stopped flowering as well as it used to, or indeed stopped flowering at all, and almost you've got a baldy patch in the middle. This is actually quite normal, particularly in things like the bearded iris. Ideally, you should be lifting the iris clumps every 3 to 5 years, precisely to rid yourself of this problem. You'd be lifting the entire clump, removing that central part that's the oldest part of the plant and the one that's not producing well, and you'd be left with not one clump, but now two smaller clumps, which you'd be either plant in the same place or plant in different areas of your garden. And the third I call the snake pit. For some reason your irises are blooming fantastically, they get bigger and bigger every year, and they start bumping into each other, and as they bump into each other they start pushing each other and they start getting a little bit twisted, and then if you go down to the base of the fan you almost see like these riddly-riddly things that looks like a snake pit. So it's simply and purely overcrowding. So the next thing is when. When do you lift your irises? Well, basically it's from late summer to early fall. Now this can be late July, August and all of September. When you do it is basically a personal preference. If you live in a cooler country, most people lift them, say, in late July or early August. Here in sunny Spain, that means for me 100 degrees, and I honestly prefer to leave mine until September where it's a bit cooler. As you can see, I am in a jacket today, and temperatures have plummeted from 33 degrees yesterday to only 19 degrees today. Now, for me, as a gardener, that is fantastic, and although it's not going to last more than 2 or 3 days, I'm certainly going to take advantage of the drop in temperatures to get some of the heavier work done in the garden. Not that moving irises is very heavy, but I'd rather do it in 19 degrees than in 33 degrees. Now this is the offending iris, and it falls into the category of I'm lifting it because it is where it shouldn't be. In actual fact, this iris was here when I arrived at the property, but I didn't know it was there. It was below ground and I had no inkling that it was actually planted there. What I'm doing is I have an area a little bit further down this bed. It's underneath a crepe myrtle, and the crepe myrtle I adore because of its trunk, and I got nothing else planted around it. So what I'm doing is any of these orphan bulbs or rhizomes that I'm finding as I'm planting other things, I'm lifting them and I'm putting them down there, and just see what happens in the future. If I like the mix, well and good, and if I don't, well, I'll just move them. Well, as you can see, the actual leaf fan isn't that wide. It's only about basically the width of my hand, so I'm certainly not anticipating that the rhizome is going to be very, very big. So I don't really need a huge big shovel. I think I'm going to be able to manage with a trowel. Also the fact that in this bed it's more mulch than soil, so I anticipate it's going to come out very, very easily. There we go. See if we can get a trowel in there now and just see if we can lift this gently. That's it. Without damaging my rows. Okay, so here we have it, and that's looking pretty good. So the iris has now been lifted. Now remember, I am lifting it because it's simply in the wrong place. But let's just imagine for one moment that I was lifting it because it wasn't blooming, and I've got this colossal big clump, and I've got leaves on the outer, on the exterior part of the clump, and the central part has got no leaves at all. The first thing you do is remove all the soil so you can actually see the roots and you can see the rhizome. So you go down to where what would be a natural break, and a natural break for me would be just about here. You can see even within the roots, these roots are lovely and nice and healthy, and these are a little bit pretty pathetic. Although I'm not rejuvenating, I am going to remove this section because it's not really all that productive. So just come in here and there it is. Now is the best time that you can actually check for damage, insect damage, eggs, or the dreaded iris rot. Now, iris rot, if you have it in your hand, is pretty easy to see. It makes the rhizome soft and squashy, either in its entirety or in parts. Now, unfortunately, if you do check the iris rhizome and it does have mushy parts, the best thing you can do is take it and chuck it, because you're going to risk spreading it to the other plants if you replant even what you think are the healthy parts. So what we're going to do now is move to a different area of the same border, which is in full sun, and we're going to replant it. Now, what we don't want to do when we're transplanting is stress out the plants. They're going to be stressed enough as it is. So try and make life just a little bit easier for them. This little guy has got to try and establish itself in a new area. And at the same time, it's got to try and support all of this greenery. But we're going to make life a little bit easier. And so what we're going to do is come in and chop off, leaving about 6 inches of this greenery. And that way, it's going to have enough leaves left to be able to continue to feed nutrients to the bulb. And we're going to remove all of this, which is just going to put extra stress, which is totally not necessary. Let's get the snippers out, and we'll just go a bit up like this. Off we come, and down like that. And there we have what we're going to plant. Now, the method I use, I call the W shape. Basically, I'm going to be digging a 5-inch deep hole, and in the center, the peak of the W, I'm going to be putting a ridge of soil. Now, that ridge of soil is going to be slightly lower than the 2 sides. Now, if you can imagine this is the ridge, what I'm going to do is place the rhizome on top of that ridge, and that's going to leave a good 4 inches for these roots to hang, and they're not going to be stressed out in a horizontal position. So here I've got my hole. I'm just going to check it now lengthways to make sure it's okay. And yes, it's okay, and height-wise it's okay. So now what I'm going to do is going to make a ridge right down the centre of this trench to place my rhizome on top. First of all, I'm just going to fill it, and then I'll mound it. So let's take the roots now and spread them out and pop them on top of this wonderful little mound. And then just lay them down. So as you can see, the roots are now quite nicely covered in soil. I'm just going to put a tiny little bit now of soil over the top of that, and that'll be it. I'm just going to put a little bit of mulch now to make it look like as if nothing had happened here. And this plant had been there for the last 10 years. Now, of course, the next thing that is very, very important is you need to water it in. Well, the iris has been now put to bed in its new location, and it's been watered in. The only thing to remember now is that as the weather gets cooler and those leaves start to die down, when they completely die down, just pick them up, chop them off at the base, and then dispose of them completely. And that way you'll avoid any future problems. Maybe there've been some eggs that you haven't seen, or any damage or any disease. Best thing you can do, just remove them completely. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll join me next Friday for another week in Granny's Garden. Bye bye now.